Hi and welcome. My name is Amit Basole. I am faculty in economics here at Azim Premji University, and today we have the pleasure of speaking with Dr Chandrasekhar Sripada, who is a clinical professor of organizational behavior at the Indian School of Business in Hyderabad, has worked extensively in the corporate sector before joining ISB, and has recently been working on issues to do with jobs and the future of work, which is, as most listeners and viewers will know, very, very hotly debated and relevant issue in India today. So we are going to speak to him about his work and his thoughts on this issue. Welcome, Dr. Sripada.
Thank you, Amit. Thank you so much.
Let me start by, so you have a book that has come out recently called The Future of Work. And I'd like you to start with telling us how you came to write this book.
Yeah, a couple of things played. One is that, I've been always wanting to write something to kind of express myself and my thoughts, put them out there. So the pandemic gave, like to many others, to me also a great time for deeper reflection and more personal time. It was almost magical for me to see that how the whole world physically stops, but then becomes economically very active. I would listen to the news of death. In the same breath, I would listen to stock markets soaring, businesses doing great. I just couldn't sort of resolve this dilemma that in the midst of so much of suffering, as that famous author said, love in the times of cholera, we have a situation where there's a pandemic and then there is this. Then I started looking deeply into my own life, the kind of time I started saving on commute, the kind of time I could sort of really spend time and get the magic of Zoom calls and getting everything done through them. So all this spurred a different set of thoughts in me, thinking that there is something happening to the world of work and we should sort of reflect on that and talk about that. That is strand one that influenced me. The second thing that happened is that obviously the world of work is what I was raised with. I'm not a classic academic. I went into a job in the beginning for 40 years. I've been in the corporate world. So I started as a management trainee in Steel Authority of India, which was a steel industry. Yes. Then I'm one of those few who had a chance over these 40 years to work for what were the three most important sectors of that time economy, which is the public sector, the private sector, and the multinational. So I'll give you only three names. So the SAIL was public sector. Let's say the most iconic private sector I worked for is Reliance. And the most iconic MNC I worked for is IBM. And in those three, similar other companies, it so happened that I also pursued human resources as a career track. So I was a career professional in human resource and human capital management. So this whole thing about sourcing, hiring, training, skilling, paying, managing people and ensuring that people feel good at work and managers don't misbehave with them was a part of my life. And that's what I spent my life, how to help firms create great workplaces so that people are productive and stress-free. Not an easy task. And then we would meet varieties of entrepreneurs and all that. So that's where I'm steeped in that thought. So I've had some very close encounters, situations which will tell you where people really work to their best potential, and situations where they are so inhibiting by nature that people will actually under the stress crumble and truly not have their potential met. So workplaces can be both, and I have seen them personally. And what that can do at small size of firms and big size of firms. One model of work, one other model of work, one type of entrepreneur, another type of entrepreneur. It can make so much of difference to a life of a person. How work is designed, how it is delivered, how it is governed, how it is paid for, how people are treated is at the heart of what happens to human potential. And yet, unfortunately, I think it is not paid enough attention. So I thought I should spend some time on thinking about it, and it comes naturally given all my experience. The third thing that played with me is that I come from a very rural background. I didn't have the privilege of even studying in English medium. I actually studied in vernacular. My schools were thatched roofs and mud walls. My teachers went off during monsoons to do cultivation. I would go to their homes to study because they would come back from farms and teach us in the evenings. So I even today know how to handle a lantern, for example, and how to cut the wick and clean the glass and take it. I used to walk kilometers. So I lived in very circumscribed backgrounds. So I have a sense of what it is to be from rural India. Because my first 20 years of my life was entirely in rural India. And it's a sad story. I mean, a lot of it has changed, but a lot of it is still not changed. And it's a sad story of how just information asymmetry, the lack of exposure, can make a lifetime change. So literally like your zip code decides your destiny. And that personal experience I have. So it was always in my mind that if I wrote anything, it has to be about how do we sort of transform this country into a more equitable place between where you are born and what you can do. And this whole thing always bothered me. And then so I saw the opportunity of the pandemic in pandemic-led work models to bridge the gap between Bharat and India, as they say. So that is another thought that crossed my mind. And the last one is I must give credit to ISB. So see, if I was in the corporate world, I don't know if I've had the kind of, let's say, even writing takes a bit of an ecosystem. You need a place where similar people are there. You are talking to people who are reflective, who are reading, who are scholarly. There are good, solid debates happening. And during the pandemic at ISB, the school ran a series of applied and field research projects, engaging with our MBA students to say that how do we come back from pandemic and what should we do to sort of really jumpstart the economy. It was called Jumpstart India. Then professors were asked to put up their hands to say, do you want to run something on the ground and to understand what can we do? I put up my hand and said that I want to work on the issue of what will change to work. How will work models evolve after the pandemic, and how can that be a liberating force for the economy? So about 60 students worked with me, and we divided the work into 10 work streams. So I started collecting data. I got the students to see about what is the whole ecosystem that is required which could build an alternative ecosystem beyond the classic, things that we do in the name of work, big cities and Gurgaons and whatever. And so that's what. So these are four forces, if you kind of look at it. My corporate experience, being close quarters with work, my personal experience of being born in rural India, my own personal magical experience of using the pandemic to do better things, and my location in ISB, I think came together to make me this. I mean, there could be many reasons, but these are the ones that I think of that shaped my book.
Thank you. Thank you for that really wonderful panorama of things and so many things to talk about. I'll also just alert the readers, you referred to the Bharat-India divide, and I'll alert the viewers to the fact that the subtitle of the book is it's about Bharat.
Yes,
it's about jobs
yeah.
and work for Bharat. But let me perhaps, there are many issues there that we could follow up on, but since we're talking about the book, let's stay with that, and you could maybe outline a few main takeaway messages that you have. You have already alluded to how perhaps work has changed, but then we're also hearing about, return to office as well happening as too. So speak maybe about remote work, but also other issues that you talk about in the book.
Yeah. So the book has 3-4 big messages. First one is actually in the very title, called Shaping the Future of Work. That thought is about, the punchline there is something like this: you either shape the future of work or you suffer it. So in the sense, future of work will anyway happen. Like any other phenomenon, future will occur and work will evolve into a different future than what it was. The question is, as conscious citizens and people, do we have the wherewithal and the thinking process to kind of steer it the way we want to steer it? Why is that so much more important? Because future of work is going to be largely influenced by two big forces. One is the technology forces, which is the AI, ML, OpenAI, generative AI, all that we are talking about, robotics, automation. And the other is demographic realities, which is about young people, their preferences, their tastes, and all that. And the other big thing is that there cannot be a one story about future of work. It is not what future of work means in America cannot be the same as in India. And unfortunately, my research tells me that the current global narrative about future of work is largely West-led. And sometimes I almost feel as though it's kind of a self-fulfilling thing, you know. So there are these technology vendors who probably want technology to so much permeate everything for reasons of making more profits, that even if it has human costs, they won't pay attention to it. Governments may not be able to do much in countries where labor costs are very high and there are just no people to work. So they would resort to technology. So for that country, it works very well. But in India, if we just I always say this, you know, I would not mind hailing a driverless car in San Francisco, but I would just love to have a driver in my car in Mumbai. And I don't want thousands of people to lose their jobs because we need a driverless car. To me in India doesn't make sense. Okay, so there is something called a contextualization of technology. We need appropriate technologies for the life stage and stage of development of a country. And my worry is we may not be that mindful because of the larger narrative around how powerful this whole AI ML is. So my book, one of the main points it makes is that we should be more discriminate. We should accept and not embrace those parts of technology that enhance productivity, that liberate people from menial tasks, that allow them to exploit their potential better and create convenience and ease to life, ease to work, which is where the flexible work options come. But we should also actively resist technologies that simply cut down on jobs for the benefit of just shareholder wealth maximization. And we must find practical frameworks to do that. Otherwise, we could be going to one extreme or the other. That is one key message. The second is about flexible work options. I believe, in fact, my book, there is a line which says that how we work determines how many of us can work. And what I mean by that is that if work, as it has happened, stereotyped over the last century or so, is all about going to a place called work in a big city, and starting from home at 8 o'clock and reaching there and then commuting and then staying there working till 7 o'clock, reaching back home at 8 o'clock, that a place of work and that kind of a rigor, to me, actually pushes many people outside the job market. Because imagine if you are a woman, you can't commute so much. If you are from a village and you can't come to this big city, if you are not very able-bodied, if you don't want to do this, there is nothing wrong with your talent. But the way we have designed the work itself excludes you from participating in the work. So to my mind, while we have an unemployment problem, we also have a work design problem. If we were a little more flexible about how work is designed, more people can work because they will find it is easier to work. So I make a big case about flexible work options. And remote work, hybrid work, etc. are just forms of flexible work. They're not the only ones. Simply by saying that, okay, you come to office at 9, but if at 1 o'clock you have to go to pick up a child in the neighborhood of the office, for that half an hour we'll let you go. I think employers should do this. It's a part of, and that employee who gets that freedom will be far more productive than the one who's worried about what will happen to his child. So flexibility in the design of work, in the administration of work is an important requirement. That will also allow this gig work, which also has a great potential. If we know how to govern it well, then gig work has a lot of potential. And people like the flexibility. And so that's another big message of what I say. Then I'm talking about how this, if flexibility comes in, how it will do many things simultaneously. It will reduce the concentration into the big cities, which are actually killing. Like take our Bangalore. I dread coming to this city because it takes me 2.5 hours to go anywhere. Back-breaking. It is so actually unproductive, according to me. And why should everybody come to Bangalore to work? Why can't they remain in Hubballi and Dharwad and wherever, Karwar, wherever, and then not come here? Work can go. So my main point I make is that time has come to think not to bring people to work, but take work to people. And use the power of technology to do that. There are many, many jobs, including jobs in manufacturing and number of service, other sectors than IT, that actually can be done. And I'll give you an example if you want to know how this can be done. Shall I give you one? Okay. Yeah. So here in Bangalore, the other day, I was there my wife needed to change her specs. And I was there in this new startup, which has become very big, called Lenskart. Right. So we go there, the shop is relatively empty. We're well received. My wife says, I want to test my eyes. So the girl there in the front office, she takes her into a room, and there's nobody in that room. There's beautiful equipment, there's a sofa, but there's nobody. And she leaves her and comes back. Then my wife says, asks what's happening. He said, no, sir, you will be taken care. Then suddenly comes alive a Zoom call, a screen. On the screen, there is a young woman who's welcoming my wife by her name. And live, okay, and saying, Lakshmi ji, we are happy that you came here. Please take your seat here. And she says, I'm so-and-so. And I'm actually talking to you from Delhi. I'm a trained optometrician. And in the next 20 minutes, I will do your eye test. And then she goes through the process. She says, put your chin here. Exactly what a personal presence would do. And the machine is operated remotely. The machine is operated.
She's getting the data from the machine.
Yeah, she's getting the data, she's getting the pictures. And the machine is moving also. Like, sometimes
right,
you have to do,
adjust,
and she says, you now turn, read that letter, now turn back. All the process, exactly what has to be done physically has been done. And then the printout comes. And then that other lady from the front office enters and says, this is your prescription. And she asks then she says that, look, the size you have been using. She also goes to the extent of saying, you are using a spec frame, which is much larger than it should be. I mean, I don't know if she had personally seen whether she would make that observation. And she's obviously a get-trained person. So I couldn't hold myself, and I went and inquired about this a little more. I was given some wonderful arguments. I was saying that, look, getting optometricians, first of all, trained ones, is not easy. They all have location preferences. If we force them to go to locations they don't want to, we don't get that talent. 2, it is not optimal for us to dedicate one optometrician to one shop, because in a day there could be only 3 walk-ins for an eye test. Whereas if I have a remote controlled operation, then I can get her to use at least 6 hours of her time to do this. So we've just taken the advantage of technology and do it. The only things they have still not done is, this girl was speaking from Delhi. I found out that she's actually from Arunachal Pradesh. And my dream is she should go back to Itanagar. And she should do the same thing from there. And it's possible. It's not required to be in Delhi. That's because obviously they must have created some central facilities, studios or whatever. So I'm just giving you, there is a huge power if we believe in technology-enabled remote or partially remote work and decentralize organizations and work processes. It's possible to be far more inclusive about employment. And that's when the talent of Bharat, which is the rural India, I'm not using it in any political sense, in the rural India, people are unable to commute, and there's a huge penalty for living in the town, small town, and that's not right. We are not able to include them in the workforce because we don't invite them with facilities that are appropriate for them. So this technology will unleash. So that's a big argument in my book. That's the message that I say, how can we use remote work? I almost go to the extent of recommending, not that I have great evidence, but recommending that remote work should be a part of our employment strategy of the country. We should think of it as a national policy, saying that, companies that allow, firms that allow remote work. And there's a whole chapter that I talk about in the book about that, about how this can be used in different sectors and not just in the IT sector. So those are the 3 big messages: that we must shape the future of work, number one. Number two is flexibility is at the heart of the thing. It's not a debate about office or not office. Even in office, you can be flexible. Even in non-office, you can be inflexible, like some employers spy on their employees. Though that's not the issue, flexibility is the issue. Third is including talent from rural India is an issue, and thinking about it like a national plan and a program is important. These are some of the things that I talk about.
Great. This is wonderful. Thank you for that summary. I wanted to pick up on a couple of things. One, you talked about the driverless cars, for example, make sense in San Francisco, but not India. So we have to be discerning in terms of adoption of technology. Now, generally, the way we are trained to think about it in economics is you have a large private economy. These decisions about technology adoption are private decisions taken by firms, and they will follow whatever logic of profits, etc., that firms follow. And this particularly becomes important in case of firms that are exposed to the global economy. They're manufacturing or services which are they're traded with the rest of the world. They have very little flexibility in making choices, or so we are led to believe, to remain competitive. Now, in that case, how does a country like India do it? Do we leave certain sectors to be competitive and know that they will therefore not generate the jobs because they have to follow the dictates of the market, while other sectors generate the jobs? Or does the government get involved in nudging firms to pro-employment policies?
So at a high level, two reactions. One is there is no way, even in highly developed economy like America, government plays and will continue to play an important role in economic development and control. So in India, there is even more a reason why government has to have a proactive stance and must encourage sectors, encourage employment-intensive sectors as opposed to non-so. And so clearly we need a plan around it. We cannot leave it to sheer market forces. If it happens, then some certain sectors will completely get lost, and that's not desirable at all. Second thing is, this whole idea that MNCs must standardize is not true. When it suits them, they don't. So as I keep saying, this hamburger becoming aloo tikki burger is a great example of how a great multinational responds to a local need. Okay. So if we are able to construct fairly strong economic business cases and arguments around how new forms of employment models, take for example, one of the India's rising sector now is called GCCs, the Global Capability Centers. Among the various companies, they were the ones which are moving into the tier 2 towns. Why? Suddenly we realized that there is a lot of business sense to go to the tier 2 town. The costs are low, retention is high, talent is equal, and it is increasingly the tier 2 rounds are getting connected by flights, etc. So the same multinational which used to congregate in Gurgaon and BKC and whatever in Bangalore, electronic city, is now willing to go to a Cochin. So there is a business case for adopting our own options around how work is designed, what technology we use, how that will actually help the other side of the world. That it is possible to design that is what my point.
Right. And so specifically, what kinds of role do you think the government can play in this, facilitating, enabling firms to make decisions that they may otherwise be constrained and not be able to make?
Yeah, so government role should not be definitely micromanaging this, certainly not. Creating more frameworks, more debate, more guidance, and some incentivization, Incentive, see, in the beginning when we wanted to develop rural towns, or at least underdeveloped states, government gave incentives to say that if you go to Jharkhand, I'll not give you tax for some time. I'm saying if an employer says that I can give more jobs remotely to X number of towns, the government can say, okay, I'll incentivize you for the half-year salary. It's possible. Internship is being promoted like that. So depends on what is the situation. We have to be case to case, not certainly when big monolithic policy. We need to be a little more decentralized, sector-wise, need-wise, location-wise, size of the firm. That's a big role. There's no point in giving all the subsidies to the big firms of the world. I think it's time to move away from the big firm mentality. The real big jobs, new jobs, as well as the number of jobs will not come from the big firms. in any sector, whether it is a services sector or a manufacturing sector. It will come from the medium MSMEs, and we don't deal with them in any structured way, in my opinion. We have some schemes, politically relevant schemes, but we need to think about MSME strategy from an employment generation point of view, and that is where I think some of these things will play out.
And in your experience, do MSMEs face constraints or challenges to expansion and hiring, which are different from the larger firms? Are they specific
They have
to
a
MSME?
higher amount of challenge in talent attraction because they don't have the brand, they are not known. Why would anybody trust them to join them? I work with MSMEs, and their biggest challenge is this. And by the way, what is MSME in one format is a startup in another format. This whole cool startup thing that has happened in India. What is the biggest challenge of a startup? Is the anonymity. It takes time for him. They may have the biggest amount of funds, but as an employer, that startup person is not known. So if you have to be inclusive and scout talent from different parts, you have to change your work models. Depend more on co-location spaces, allow people to be in their own areas and work for you. I think startup entrepreneurs, MSA entrepreneurs, both of them have a huge need to be more flexible, and today they are not.
What about skills? This is something perhaps we should touch on before we run out of time. As you know, there have been huge investments in skilling on part of the government of India. Generally, there's a strong sense that we don't have an adequately skilled workforce. On the other hand, there are also people who say that you create the jobs and the skills will come as a result of working on those jobs. Where do you stand on this, and maybe say a little bit more about that?
Yeah. No, so I have some thoughts, not that I have all the right thoughts there, but my experience and reading and my own research tells me that this whole plumbing between education, skills, employability and employment, there are 4 stages through this water flows. So a person has to be first get foundationally educated, then during some period of that they should be skilled, and then the skilling should lead to employability, and employability should lead to employment by having jobs. Something has broken, in my opinion, in all the stages. So education doesn't encourage any skilling. NEP is trying to build that in, but there's a long way to go, and we need to sort of allow a little bit of interweaving of skills with education pretty early on, so that students understand that hands-on things are far more important than theoretical things. Second thing is that employability will improve if we are skilling people for the jobs, not the other way around. So my big point is, if we don't know what jobs are coming up, and we just broadly skill people because the fancy say today everybody says we'll train, states are saying we'll train people in AI. Now, how many firms can actually employ AI? What they can do? What is the economics of that? When will a company really adopt AI? What can jobs can do? In fact, if any, there are many places where AI is a direct threat to jobs. The coder who's doing the AI will himself lose his job because AI will do his coding. So that kind of a situation, we have to be careful. So we do not have a thinking about how jobs define the skills. I think we should move away from skills leading to jobs defining the skills. And then once jobs are understood, then employment, if the sectors are encouraged, like the infrastructure is there and growth is broadly, that part I think we are in a good shape. The country is in a growth phase. So I think if we just sort of liberate some of these sectors and create better infrastructure and more support systems for them, they will all grow. And if they grow, they will need more jobs. Once they know jobs, and if we can get an anticipation of those jobs and skill for people, then it will create into a more virtuous cycle. And because they will be available to, they will be able to hire skilled people, they will further grow. And the skilled people will be more productive. The productivity will lead to more profits, and profits can be plowed back to growth. So this is how I see this whole thing playing out. But we are not yet fully in that direction.
So thank you for such an illuminating discussion. I wanted to wrap up by talking a little bit, getting your opinion also on how do we move forward from some of the ideas in your book on flexible work, on bringing work to people, as you said very nicely, rather than people to work? How do we operationalize some of these ideas at the firm level? Of course, keeping in mind that firms are going to respond to incentives, both market incentives and government incentives. So what are your ideas on how do we get this process on the ground?
Yeah, not an easy one, not at the scale that India demands. Many minds have to come together to do this. I hope these ideas will grow. But there are some very fertile conditions we have, according to me, which gives me the hope that these ideas will actually flourish. The ground is ready for it now. The most important one is, it may not be forever, but for the next 20 years at least, we will be young. And the young workforce actually will demand flexibility. And companies, if not anything, just to be able to attract talent, have to really change their current command control approaches. And so I am hopeful that the sheer dynamic of demographic and company practices will kind of interplay into a new order of work. That's one. Second is, research is suggesting, through this book writing, I said a lot of research I read, it's clear that in conditions of autonomy and flexibility, that actually people perform better than in conditions of control and micromanagement. Therefore, I hope that even if there are sporadic experiments around this by big firms, then the clear ground level evidence will create a swell, and people will be persuaded that actually the old micromanagement doesn't work. And so that's another thing that I think. The third thing that is giving me hope is the rapid pace at which technologies that enable this amount of new formats of work are growing, whether for team collaboration or for just distance management or automation, remote management. Number of technologies are going. It's now possible to actually run a factory without going to the factory. Such factories already exist, which are zero touch. And this whole digital twin concept that has come, you can actually see, I mean, I know that during pandemic, a blast furnace in a steel plant was run from a distance and not next to that. In Bangalore, you have a not-for-profit which runs ICUs in Northeast, sitting here. The doctors show them videos of patients and prescriptions go, progress is monitored, and all that happens. So, lot of sectors in which we can take, drones can be used, satellite technology can be used. So, technology. So things are forced, demographic shifts, technological changes, and the firms need to attract talent to meet their growth needs, I think will all converge to create some ripe conditions for some of these ideas to take off. But they won't happen unless some of like-minded people, some NGOs and some government bodies come together. It's a vast problem to solve by any one individual or any one measure. But I think every part of this, there are big four parts, There is the government. One is the union government, and then the state government, the local government. So the local governments, take for example, what does the Tesla, what is that town called? Tulsa experiment in America. I write about it in my book. So Tulsa is a little town. It could be something like less than Hubli, much smaller. Tulsa's mayor during the pandemic went out and created a program called Tulsa Remote and told people in San Francisco, Chicago, New York that if you come and live in my town, I'll give you $10,000 upfront. Now imagine a mayor of Mysuru doing that. Mysuru is already a big town, but I'm saying much smaller town doing that and saying, you come live in my town, I'll give you this facility, and actually ties up with the companies to kind of host people there. I think that's also, every part of the government system can play a role in nudging, incentivizing, facilitating and supporting this cause, according to me. So government should actually move as much as possible into Tier 3 towns now. Tier 3 is now the next big wave, according to me. And that should happen. That's one. And by the way, companies like Joho, with Sridhar Vembu's experiments, are already showing good results. They are in small Tier 3 towns, and it's happening. That's one part. So the next part is the education skills conundrum that I think, your Azim Premji University is already doing some work in creating more awareness in schools and training teachers. I think this kind of work should be scaled to see that the teachers understand that the future of education is not about knowing, it's about doing, and how do you convert knowing into doing is the real issue. So that's another side, the whole investment in education and skills. And the employers in their self-interest, I think all these national bodies, CII, FICCI and all those employer bodies, including local bodies of MSMEs, must actually make this a single point agenda in the next 5 to 10 years about how do they create more understanding among the firms, train the firm leaders to understand how they first learn to describe jobs, anticipate jobs and decode them into skills and create skill ecosystems that supply the talent. Otherwise, we're all dipping into the same pond and the pond is dry and over. So I think number of forces have to come together. Hopefully it will work.
Thank you. This was a very huge kind of set of issues that you outlined in a very short time. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure talking to you, Professor Sripada. And we hope to look out for more work coming out of, your own work at ISB and perhaps you working with other people as well to realize some of these ideas.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
I look forward. Thank you.